The history of heavy.
Hello and welcome to the History of Heavy, a show that is once again exclusively about Black Sabbath. It's the show where we chronicle Black Sabbath across the genres they created, song by song, album by album. I am one of your two co-hosts, Michael Huntsman, in Sebastopol, California, temporarily. And on the other line is my dear pal, Big Daddy Dave Lieberman in San Francisco, California. Hello, Dave.
Howdy.
How are you,
Here
man?
we are.
What's happening? Here we are.
I'm excited. I'm excited to do this episode that I've been training for more than half of my life.
Yeah, this is going to be a conversation we've had many times over, but in a container that we have never had it specifically about before. So I'm looking forward to your perspective on this very specific and very important document, not only in the history of Black Sabbath but in the history of music. So that will be fun. And further, it's been about 3 weeks since we lost Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy passed on July 22nd. So it seems, about a month, I guess. So it seems at the same time more recent than that, but also much longer ago because we have spent a lot of time talking about it and thinking about it. And then as it relates to this podcast, our show, our conversation chronicling the history of heavy music, this is one of 2 episodes that will put a cap on the year 1970 before we move on to the decades. So that should be a lot of fun. And, again, we're talking about Black Sabbath, which we do just about every episode. But the first time, again, that we will have a conversation about the band's first full statement, which was their eponymous debut album, Black Sabbath. So we don't need to do a cultural corner. You have set up 1970 in all the ways 1970, the year, can be set up. We've covered kind of the significant pop culture events, the big name bands we've talked about that kind of fall under the heavy umbrella. So we don't have a lot.
And we did a history of Black Sabbath.
So we really don't need to get into any preamble, except I do want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about the genesis of this record. We're not going to get into the history of the band. We're not going to talk all about the individual band members necessarily. I want to talk about these songs and this record. But let's tee it up. So the album Black Sabbath by the band Black Sabbath was recorded on October 16th, 1969 in a single 12-hour session at Regent Sound Studio in London and produced by Roger Bain, which is just absolutely nuts. They recorded this album, Black Sabbath, in one session.
Yeah.
Only adding a couple of guitar overdubs, specifically to Sleeping Village and NIB, I believe. And obviously the rain and the church bells in the song Black Sabbath were added after that initial recording session. But effectively, they recorded the album live. Ozzy singing in an isolation booth while Geezer and Tony and Bill were playing the music live as if, at a show. And this is what they created. The album was released by Vertigo Records in the UK on Friday the 13th, February of 1970, and it reached number 8 on the British album charts. And then Warner Brothers Records released the record in the United States on June 1st of 1970, and in the United States, it peaked at number 23. The album very quickly sold 1 million copies, so it was very commercially successful, though initially regarded as kind of a failure critically. At the time, the record was considered kind of a hard blues rock record, but critic Steve Huey, I thought, had the right description for the album, which was as transcending its clear roots in blues rock and psychedelia to become something more, and as a reflection of the bleak industrial nightmare of the band's hometown of Birmingham, England. Of course, in the intervening years, critics and fans largely agree that the album Black Sabbath essentially invented heavy metal by being the first release in the genre. From the album's tone and tempo to Tony Iommi's use of the tritone guitar interval to Geezer Butler's lyrics, everything we have come to know as metal is represented in these 5 songs. You can count the songs in a number of ways, but let's just call it 5. Um, so that's kind of teeing it up for just digging into the record. But I wanted to say one more thing that I heard on a Brooklyn vegan podcast talking about Sabbath. That this isn't exactly how they framed it, but I thought this was a really apt way to kick into this conversation. And basically, they were describing what it sound, and the guys talking are much younger than us. They're probably in their 30s, I would guess, late 30s probably, and so came to Sabbath, in the early 2000s or mid 2000s or whenever they did. And they were talking about hearing Black Sabbath for the first time in the context of the modern day metal that they were listening to, and how relevant and heavy and of today that this record from 1970 still sounds. And put it in the context of listening to the Sonics, right? And to understand the relevance of the great Seattle proto-punk garage band, the Sonics, a band we have dedicated an episode of this podcast to when we talked about The Witch. But to understand the Sonics' relevance to punk, it's with the understanding that their music came out in the 1960s. That context is important when you hear it, because they do not sound like modern day punk. But when you listen to Black Sabbath, no context is needed to understand their relationship to metal, because their music still sounds fresh and relevant and current, which is just a very specific way of saying things that you and I have often said and talked about. But I think in that context, I think it's really interesting because, we've chronicled through 30 episodes. We've talked about all of these different bands and how they relate to heavy. And often we're having to explain how contextually, um, the Kinks or the Kingsmen or whomever, Link Ray, are how they are heavy, and we are having to explain, well, this is why, and here's who they influenced, and this led to that, and there was no distorted guitar before, and da 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 da. With Black Sabbath, is it how is Black Sabbath heavy? Yeah, listen to this.
Right.
So that is the context that I want to dig into the conversation. So, Dave, how are you feeling? Talk to me about this record, independent of everything else about Black Sabbath. Tell me about your feelings and your relationship with Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath, featuring the song Black Sabbath.
I have excellent news for you. I have had this conversation so many times. I know all of my talking points.
Excellent.
Um, I just don't know where to begin. Okay. Well, I want to touch on a couple of things that you
Okay.
mentioned.
Okay.
First of all, the contemporaneous nature, the timelessness of the music. And I feel like that is a direct result of the fact that they're the progenitors of it. And since they really created this, what I keep calling this tree with all these branches, as the branches branch off, they're further pronunciations of the root Sabbath. And so it keeps sounding like Sabbath. So you can listen to Sabbath and it's very familiar because the metal of today came from it and directly, like there's a direct lineage. So
Let me stop
it
you there
seems
for a
like it
second.
makes sense to me that it would seem fresh.
So yes and no. I definitely agree with that in the context of a lot of contemporary music. Like if you think it's Sleep isn't necessary, Sleep's been around for a long time, but if you think of a band like Sleep, it's like yeah, obviously you can hear Black Sabbath in Sleep or Electric Wizard or Orange Goblin or a whole bunch of bands. But the thing that blows my mind about how relevant and fresh Black Sabbath still sounds is in relationship to bands that don't sound anything like them but are crushingly heavy. Like if you think about like Carcass or Cannibal Corpse or Entombed or any the whole of death metal. Death metal doesn't sound anything like Black Sabbath. It is crushingly heavy, but if you put on the song Black Sabbath, that shit sounds as heavy as the darkest, deepest Cookie Monster growls that were coming out of South Florida in the late '90s and early 2000s. It even with grindcore and Funeral Doom is directly connected to Sabbath, but lots of music that sonically doesn't sound necessarily connected to Black Sabbath, even hardcore. If you listen to
Mhm.
the Cro-Mags or heavy hardcore bands, you can't necessarily hear the sonic connection. But Black Sabbath still sound as heavy as any of those bands with a record that came out in 1970.
Yes, and maybe I should say it a different way, which is what I think they stumbled upon was this um, magic formula that was the essence, epitome, purity, the Arkenstone of metal, and
Mm.
everything would sound. It doesn't have to sound like this to have the essence of it in their sound, the heaviness part, right? And so when you listen to Sabbath, you immediately have a familiarity because Sabbath is
The
the
Seed.
mirepoix of this whole stew, right? Like one of the things that happens when um so I just was traveling to Turkey and I was eating the food and I'm like, oh, this is all these Mediterranean spices in a different order, right? And when I eat Asian cuisine, different Asian cuisines are like a lot of the same spices and like ingredients in a different order with a twist here, a twist there, but it's Asian cuisine or it's Mediterranean cuisine. There's this root that's familiar that you taste that you know already, even though the dish is different and distinct. And so it's like Sabbath is that spice, that that root element that if you take everything else away, you have Sabbath. If you add that to everything, you add a little bit, a dash
No,
of this, a
no,
dash of that, you have all these other things. And so it doesn't have to be pure Sabbath to sound like Sabbath or to recall it or to be related to it. So you have this huge tree of genres that doesn't sound like Sabbath, but it is heavy and it is dark. And at its essence, you can listen to Sabbath and know exactly what you're listening to and know how they're connected
no.
or
I
know that they're connected.
I agree with you, and I don't need to belabor this point too much, but I'm more talking about purely sonically how it's not necessarily even connecting the dots intellectually. It's if you think about hip hop as a good analog, right? So if you listen to Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, or you listen to African Bambaataa, or you listen to Run DMC today, they sound dated. They
Yeah.
they they sound great, but you can tell immediately, like and not necessarily it doesn't sound like the same kind of music, regardless of the genre or how hip hop has evolved. Those records just sound dated. Black Sabbath, to me, doesn't sound dated that same way. Like it still sounds like if if the history of music was exactly the same, and some other band, White Sabbath put out this record in 1970, but it was, say Coven was the band that broke and became the big popular band that spawned all of this different kind of music. And this record, Black Sabbath, came out today, and we'd never heard it before. We would be like, "Holy fuck, that's heavy as shit."
Right.
You know what I mean?
I do. Um, I'm I'm wondering if it's the presence of blues because blues is so fundamental to rock and roll and to so many different it you know it's the bedrock underneath all of the rock and roll pop music, um, rhythm and blues. I wonder if that's what we're pecking at. um, I hear what you're saying, and I'm having a hard time iterating it too. So, full disclosure, this is not a talk track that I have rehearsed. This is not in my quiver of stuff about this album. So, good on you for finding new inroads into this album and thinking about this album. Let's come back to that.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, maybe
this
it'll
is
arrive as we go through the song. So,
yeah,
let's talk about what is arguably Black Sabbath's all-time most important song. Um, the song Black Sabbath, which alone effectively invents not only heavy metal itself, but certainly doom metal, and with its mentions of kind of occultism and Satan and whatever, though it doesn't sound like black metal, kind of invents the sort of persona of black metal.
sure.
This song is important beyond its sonic greatness, although it also has that. So tell me about, and in some ways, we've talked, and we'll get to this next week. We've talked a lot about the songs Iron Man and Paranoid, and how they fit kind of almost outside of the broader Black Sabbath catalog. This song, Black Sabbath, for me, is kind of one of those. I almost never think of it or talk about it as I think about my favorite Black Sabbath songs
Sure.
or putting together Black Sabbath playlists, because it's kind of this thing that sits over here by itself to me.
Yeah, I would consider this like a warm up. I'm going to listen to some Sabbath, so I'm going to warm up with this song, and then I'm going to listen to some Sabbath. Uh, it is more of a poem to me than
Mm.
a song. It is. Um, I just. It's important to. It has become a very important, interesting punctuation and roadmap because sonically it starts off brooding, sound effects, rain, thunder, a bell, and then we get this very iconic Tony Iommi riff that's the tritone that the whole sound of
It's
Sabbath
all
is
built on.
built
Yep.
around.
Yep.
But it introduces us to the riff master in this proto riff, right? I'm going to overuse some of these terms because they just keep applying, but it's the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. It's back to the beginning.
Uh-huh.
So in this song, we see the beginnings of the things that we're going to hear over and over again. Their overall sonic sound of, or their signature sonic. Man, I'm really stumbling. This is their signature sound,
It's their
and
fingerprint, kind of.
it's their fingerprint.
Yeah.
Yes, and we are getting a hint of it right here in a very concise, contained way. It's got a groove. It's got uh, a grind to it. It's got a rock out session to it. It's got all of those things. But this big intensity, Ozzy's vocals really bring despair. The emotion is front and center. And having all of these elements in this one piece at the beginning of the first album, the eponymous song of the eponymous album of the eponymous band. Like this is just so concentrated, right? We're going to be diluting this song for 8 albums, uh, and we learn about it right now, right? And then it floats into the rest of the album, which are totally connected to this thread of doom and groove and blues, but ominousness. Um, I think it's really interesting because it's this build up, this warm up. It cranks you up, and because it starts so slow and ends so hard.
Oh, right. So I think this what you just I'm going to say what you just said using my words to say it,
Yeah.
just to say the same thing back to you basically. And that is, this song sort of shows their hand. Like
Yes.
this is all of our stuff. That includes the Tony Iommi guitar tone, um, the tritone interval, Ozzy's incredible vocal, Geezer and Bill's kind of lock in rhythm section, the amazing instrumental coda that rocks up as you described to take us out of the song, Geezer's very lyrics that take you to a very specific place in this story-like structure.
Yeah.
And something that I don't think we've ever talked about, this song introduces, that is prevalent throughout Black Sabbath's catalog, that I think is really important to connecting people to their music, and certainly me to their music. And that is, many of their lyrics, this song included, are sung from a first person perspective.
Hmm.
That Ozzy is saying, what is this that stands before me?
Hmm.
That this is happening to me. So when he does the "oh please God help me" stuff, you're getting it from this person's, Ozzy's, Geezer's actual perspective on the events that are unfolding. And even when they see wizards or fairies wearing boots or whatever, it's,
Right.
this is happening to the person singing the song. And it
Right.
connects you to the singer, and it brings you inside the song. It makes an emotional connection, whatever the subject of the song. And I think that's a really important part of Black Sabbath that is lost, not in a lot of music, yes, but specifically in metal, where it's, here's a fantastical thing that happened in some
Yeah.
story, or here's something that happened long ago, or here's something that happened in this fantasy land, or here's, this whatever character, or here's what Gollum
Rainbows and
thought.
dragons. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of Sabbath is, holy shit, I can't believe what's going on. I can't believe
Right.
how in turmoil the world is, or how in
Right.
love with this person I am, or how
Yeah.
afraid I am, or whatever. And I think that's really important to how connected I feel, and I think a lot of people feel, to their music.
That is really good insight. I really like bringing that perspective. I hadn't considered it in that way. That's great. As you were talking, I was hearing another analogy for this song, which is this is their pilot. And you have mentioned the 2 album sequences, which I would say are analogous to the seasons. So we
Mm.
have a pilot to season 1, right? And we're going to get season 1 right now, and then it's going to have a finale, and we're going to get season 2, and
Yeah.
it feels like we're getting that introduction to what the whole thing is going to be about. We get everything we need to know in this song, and then we keep exploring the characters and the elements, um, to everyone's benefit.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Um, Incredible album opener. It certainly in the conversation for best track one, side ones of all time. It,
And I gotta wonder, like, the magic only happens once when you put on the record and you've never heard it before, and then you listen to
yeah.
that, and then it goes into the
Yeah.
rest. But like, what was this like in 1970?
Yeah, that's the I would
That's the thing. Like,
uh
okay, Zeppelin's happened. Uh, Iron Butterflies happened. You know, Cream has happened. Now you're faced with this. What are you? How is this happening to you? How are you receiving this?
Yeah, and I think because the song is so down tempo, that had to sound just that much more intense and apocalyptic and overwhelming in the moment, because there was such an energy of like rocking things up at that
Yes,
time. Things were either like, galloping pace sort of stuff, the big Zeppelin songs, rock and roll and immigrant song and whatever, Kiss, all these bands were kind of pushing the energy forward, and Black Sabbath is really pulling it back, but not relenting any of the power. um,
right, right.
even In and Out of Gavita, which is a more kind of down tempo song, has a groove to it and
Yeah,
a
it's
and a
got pep.
propulsion. Yeah,
Yeah,
that the song Black Sabbath does not have. And again, it's to this day still sounds heavy and intense.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
On to track two. Oh, I should say, because on my previous podcast, and I've asked you to do this when we've talking about complete albums, my favorite three-song sequence, and you sort of can't go wrong on this record, but begins with the song Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath into the Wizard, into Wasp slash Behind the Wall of Sleep slash basically slash NIV, which might be kind of a cheat, but those three in a row, to me, are kind of perfect. And the Wizard, I wouldn't argue with anybody that said The Wizard is their favorite Black Sabbath song, period, of all time. It's that good. And kicking off with Ozzy's harmonica. We did an episode dedicated to this song, but anything more that we haven't said about The Wizard that you want to say about The Wizard?
Um, it's clean, clear, concise. It again is a very elementary. It's Sabbath 101, right? We got the pilot, we've got the syllabus. Now we've taken class one. All right, this is a complete class in Sabbath. It's got everything there. It's got some occultism, but it's a twist on it, right? Because everyone's happy when the wizard walks by.
Right.
It doesn't sound like that. It's got this very sonic doom, but this is a happy song. It's about the wizard coming by spreading joy. Uh, and it's this paradox that is a signature through line for a lot of Sabbath songs. Very powerful, very clear, crisp, great riff, great groove. And I love how one of the things that's on display here is the tightness of the band. And we talk about how Bill's drumming was acknowledged as, we can almost say, sloppy
Mhm.
in times, where he followed more than led, but he wasn't a timekeeper. He was moving
Well, he
around.
describes himself as a percussionist. He doesn't call himself
Right,
a drummer. Right.
right. And that is true, but on display is his ability to drum and his ability to time keep, because there are clean breaks where everybody stops for a second and then moves into the next note. And when you have these, you know, a lot of times there's this wall of sound that's happening with guitar effects or with a drum fill or whatever, but there's some very clean breaks in this song. So love this song.
To me, the greatest thing about Bill Ward is that he was playing stuff that no other drummer would have thought to play. There's a version of Black Sabbath that has a four on the floor kind of typical hard rock drummer where they just sound like a regular. In this song, it's really on display where he does the in between the da da da. He's playing this weird like like this really weird jazz staccato thing
Yes,
that most
yes,
drummers wouldn't have played, and it makes the songs really have this unique energy. And the bass flourishes by Geezer in this song are incredible. His bass sounds so good on this record, but on this song in particular, the the Wizard is really a weird song to me in their catalog, because I don't know why, but I always think of it as a deep cut. You know, it's track 2 on album 1. It was on their first greatest hits compilation called "We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll." Like, it's not a deep cut,
Right.
but
No.
but I think of it as outside of those obvious, you know, NIB and War Pigs and Fairies Wear Boots and Iron Man and Paranoid and kind of all those songs. I feel like it's a like one rung less known, I guess, than
Sure.
those songs. And there's something because of that I always, it makes me like it that much more. Like
Yeah.
it does feel like this little secret, even though millions of people know it and love it
Right.
and
Right.
listen to it. Um,
It's only that the other things get celebrated more often.
that's a good way to say it.
It doesn't diminish this song. It's just in some loud company.
Yeah, and look, if you know, we like to talk about Spotify listens as not a great but a fun metric to review on the show, and if you use that by a gauge of song's popularity just specific to this record, it has the second most listens of any song on the record, just behind the song Black Sabbath. So we can get into those numbers toward the end, but I thought that was interesting. All right, let's move into to Black Sabbath's first Slash song. It will not be their last. And
Slasher.
this is where, you know, like the Beatles kind of do at the end of Abbey Road, where it's a whole bunch of snippets of other songs. The Beastie Boys did on B-Boy Bouillabaisse on Paul's Boutique, you know, where it's like, we've got a great riff or a great verse or a great part, but not a full song. And we're just going to put a whole bunch of those great parts together. As we have discussed before on other Black Sabbath episodes, Tony Iommi took this way before any of those guys. Well, not the Beatles, I guess, but way before a lot of those guys. To a fine art in that he would have what could be just totally incredible standalone 4-minute songs and just cut them down and made them intros or just parts of other bigger songs. First, again, evidenced here
And
with
over and over he does this.
over and over. Starting here with kind of the instrumental piece that's called Wasp, the fully fleshed out, really great song called Behind the Wall of Sleep, the the precursor to Cliff Burton's Anesthesia Pulling Teeth, which is called Basically, which is basically Geezer Butler jamming with a maybe, well, his first bass wah pedal on record, leading into, of course, the classic and my favorite song on this record, NIB. So talk about Wasp, Behind the Wall of Sleep, Basically, and NIB, Dave.
It's such a gratifying piece of music,
It really
and
is.
it's another paradoxical aspect of this album and this band is that on the one hand you want each of these songs to be a half of an album exploration and jam session. On the other, you're stoked that it just keeps going and going and going. Like it's so rewarding. Um, I love this progression, this song progression. I think we get a lot of the heavy blues that I love about Sabbath in this song progression. A little less so than the next one, but it's right there. And all it does is sets us up for more on side two or side B. Um, I love this. I love this songs. I love this songs.
I love how, you know, I talked a bit about how the song Black Sabbath, well, we both talked about it, takes us through lots of different parts of Black Sabbath. This bit does it even to more of an extreme. I love the super kind of light vibe and the groove of Behind the Wall of Sleep, which is very different to the tone and energy and mood of NIB, but they still very much sound like the same band. Um, and the when Ozzy is singing "Change Your Body to a Corpse" over and over again in a way that only Mr. Osborne could have done, it's such a great example. You talked about it with the Wizard, where the music and the lyrics and Ozzy's voice sometimes contradict the way the music sounds, but it still fits together perfectly in this really incredible way that only Black Sabbath could really do. And I think it's really well on display throughout, this one or four songs, however you define it.
Yeah, one of the lyrics, now from darkness there springs light. Wall of sleep is cool and bright. Wall of sleep is lying broken, sun shines in, you have awoken. It sounds hard and dark, but it's about light and awakening from
Yeah.
darkness.
Yeah. One of my
Um,
favorite things is when
it's so
somebody,
funky. It's
yeah,
so
yeah,
funky. Like,
yeah. Well, that funk and that groove again is a thing that a lot of metal bands didn't borrow from Black Sabbath, and I think it's often a big miss. It's one of the things I actually like about the New Orleans sludge metal scene that owes everything to Black Sabbath. Bands like Crowbar and I Hate God and Graveyard Rodeo and Acid Bath and all those guys. They got it, but
yeah.
a lot of bands that borrowed the heaviness and the riffing from Black Sabbath didn't borrow the rhythm or the groove.
No, and I feel like there was some exploration of more slap bass style funk, which I
Mm.
found cringy.
Oh, and
I didn't
it has not
I didn't
aged well.
appreciate it. It
It's bad.
definitely it just didn't speak to me in the moment. And what is missing is the groove factor.
That's
Like
right. That's right.
it's not it just doesn't swing.
Agreed. All right, let's move on to what I think is a totally underrated song, and that is "Wicked World," which man, this again is one of those songs I've heard it a million times, but every time it comes on when I listen to the album, I'm almost like, oh yeah, I forgot about Wicked World. I'm kind of expecting the other ones, but fuck yeah, Wicked World, it's so good. And again, a song again that I don't put on mixtapes or playlists or whatever,
Oh
but
my
every
God,
time I hear
yes.
it, I'm like, God damn, it's such a good song.
I love this song. And it's where we get into their activism. They're making a statement. This is a political song,
Mhm.
like bold-faced, anti-war song. Um, and they're in the middle of Vietnam, right? I mean, they're in the middle of the era of history which Vietnam is happening, and very famously is being broadcast to the world. And we're seeing this war occur in real time, and it's very um, uh, unbalanced with all the different players in the game. And so there's this feeling of disempowerment on the one hand, but seeing through the facade very clearly. And I think this song really captures that angst. Like, we know what's happening. We're living this life. We can see you, and you're just playing a game.
Right.
Like, who do you think we are? Who do you think you are?
Well, that activism and the Black Sabbath were hippies. They loved the Beatles, and they were definitely Geezer in particular and Oz. They were very much like part of the Flower Child movement and into peace and love, and adding that to the stew of the Devil's Tritone and the
Right,
heavy groove
right.
and all of the other stuff, being pissed about being in Birmingham and Tony's accident and that makes him play specifically, all the stuff makes it Black Sabbath. And again, that sort of hippie activism part of it isn't talked about a lot, but it's really
Right.
important to
Geezer
the
Butler's been vegan since he was like 6.
right, right, right,
He's like, "Whoa, why would you eat animals? Ah!"
right, right.
When he was a child. Like, they just are this. This is just who they are. So,
Yeah,
love this song.
agreed.
And it also has great grooves, very good musical progression. There's a solid musical song there, even though it's got strong lyrics. It's not like um, overdone in that regard.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. It's time for me to clear the lane a little bit for you. We get to the last Slash song on the record. That is A Bit of Finger, Sleeping Village, and Warning, which I know you have a very strong affinity about. This is the part of the conversation that I have been looking the most forward to. But first, I want to clear out and let you say what you want to say about this song. I know it's incredibly important to you.
This is we're gonna play both cards. This is one song, but it's a slasher of three songs. So this is my three-song progression. I've said it a million times. My favorite Black Sabbath song is the first two albums. But if I have to pick one song, it's Warning with A Bit of Finger and Sleeping Village as the runway or the intro to Warning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's a lot going on here and a lot to unpack. Um, each of these songs is a display of just musical talent and creativity. There, we talk about the virtuosity guitar players and how uninteresting they are. Um, Tony Iommi has this quality. He has this ability. He just brings it out in um, it's a seasoning, right? It's not the main dish. And in Warning, which by the way is a cover of the Ainsley Dunbar Retaliation, which is a wonderful band name. I love that. And Ainsley Dunbar was a established drummer, played with a bunch of people. Go look him up. Um, but I had been listening to this song for years and years and years, and just a couple of years ago learned that it was a cover. And I listened to the original. And the original is pretty rad, but the twist that Sabbath puts on it and this huge musical solo interlude fo- um, uh, spotlight on Tony Iommi allows us to get the full range. And so it's so apt to me to start this album with Black Sabbath, where we're at the pilot, and to have the season finale be this, like oftentimes a season finale is a two-parter, and this song feels like a two-parter. We start off the song with the song, we go into a solo that leads to a solo that leads to a kind of an unplugged. It's not
Acoustic.
acoustic, but it's not distorted. And we hear nice clean guitar work. He's capable of all these sounds, all this music. And we really appreciate the talent that he brings. He's not just a power chord riff machine. Although he is that, he is not just that. And we get more of this when we get into, Orchid and some of the other
Solitude.
interludes,
Yeah.
Solitude, beautiful, beautiful pieces. And it kind of lays the foundation for having that Spanish guitar style that we hear in Metallica all the time, or at least early Metallica. I'm not familiar with their later stuff, so I don't know if it's still there. Um, but it is so satisfying to me. It's so gratifying to me. And there is a piece of this music that is my favorite 10-second musical phrase in existence that is contained in this song. And so it's always a joy for me to listen to this song. It always pumps me up. I've put this on and been like, oh, listen to it, and every time. And that's me. That's my relationship with this song and with this album, and I know that. Not everybody's going to have that reaction or that connection to it, but this is the song that I have that connection with. And part of the reason that I have that connection with these two albums is because of a time that I spent where they were my best friend. That I came to these two albums all the time, and they were always in the background helping me through a challenge. Um, and imprinted me. And so the way this album ends with this song progression of these three pieces is, to put it crudely, it's just the orgasm of all this foreplay that's been happening. It's so gratifying.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a good illustration of what makes Black Sabbath so great. For as much as we both love this band, it is for what I perceive to be vastly different reasons. And this song is a great illustration of that. And I'm not saying this just to have a controversial counterpoint for the sake of a podcast episode, but in all sincerity, this is not only my least favorite song on this record, it is one of my least favorite songs across the first six Black Sabbath albums. Uh, I like it. It's fine. But it has sort of the two things that I don't really love, and that is the blues, which I am not a fan of. The song is very bluesy, and it's super noodly. That the some of the things that you connect to in the song, just that kind of rambling, kind of noodly guitar stuff that feels very off the cuff and improvisational at points, really kind of turns me off. Like it sort of makes me a little edgy and makes me just want him to get to the point and feel
Mm.
like the song could be a lot better if it was half as long. And that it's great. It's Black Sabbath. I love it. But in the context of all the other Black Sabbath, this is kind of my least favorite flavor of Black Sabbath across the first six albums.
Yeah.
Everything beyond that are different conversations. But across the six albums, which are all masterpieces in and of themselves, this version of Black Sabbath is probably my least favorite.
Okay, I want to respond to that. Um, Firstly, I totally get it. One of the reasons that I love this song is just because of the relationship I have with the album and this the two album
Yep.
the two album season. Um, and I totally get it. And you're right. This is the noodliest version of Sabbath that we are ever going to get. We don't get it like this ever again, which I appreciate. I don't. That isn't why I like this song. But what I think the noodly stuff does is brings that sense of tension and scribble. It's like a musical scribble that all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden like soars into a clean, like um you are elevated out of it at the end, and the way the music builds and builds and builds, and then like dun-dun,
Mm-hmm.
it soars. And Rush
That part
does
of the
this,
song is great. That
right?
that
But
that that
it is great because you've endured the
totally,
chaos.
totally,
And
totally.
so I don't disagree with your perception of it. I just accept that that is a necessary prerequisite to get to that orgasmic part, to get to that conclusive resolution of
Yeah,
conflict.
totally fair point.
And that's what I really enjoy about the song, is that it has that journey, whereas their other songs really don't. They don't seem to have that conflict and resolution piece to it. And so in this song we get a unique side of Sabbath that we don't get really again.
I think Symptom of the Universe kind of does what you're describing
Oh,
as effectively
yes,
in less
yes.
than half the time.
Okay. Very, very good point. It absolutely does that. And I think
And Iron
um
Man kind of does it the opposite way. You know, it's kind of got this
right,
prodding energy that kind of like explodes at the end in the coda.
right. But nothing so noodly,
No,
right?
right,
Like
right, right. No, nowhere
um
near as noodly. Yeah.
no, but Symptom of the Universe does do that, does have that soaring resolution.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh but we don't get it from the noodle. We get it from a different source of chaos. So again, just more range. So that's I will leave it there. I love this song. This is my favorite three song and one album.
Yeah, look, I mean, again, to just put a kind of exclamation point on the album for me, at least in this part of the conversation, is that's that's what makes this band so great. It's how varied and complicated and interesting and genre hopping they were. I mean, we just talked about everything from Warning to Symptom of the Universe to, Orchid and Solitude to the song Black Sabbath. It's that's all the same band. And it all sounds like Black Sabbath, but they all sound completely different.
All those pieces sound completely different, and all those pieces we have all of those musical pieces. We have pieces of those pieces in this
Right.
album.
Right.
Uh, Parts of those pieces. That's bad. I'm stumbling over English here.
I think that's why they're so why so many people love this band so much is because there's different ways you can love them. You can love Ozzy, you could love Tony, you can love Geezer and Bill, you could love the lyrics, you could love
Yeah,
the
you can
energy,
love
you
the
could love the
personalities, you can
yeah,
love the
they're
musicality, you can
yeah.
love the darkness, you can love the brightness. Like it's such a paradoxical band.
Yeah, I mean, look, I love Slayer, but everybody loves Slayer for the same reason. Right? Right. There's not a lot of nuance there.
Right,
Right.
right, right,
As a
right,
band that
right.
was influenced by Black Sabbath.
That's such a
Um,
great analogy.
all right,
They did a
let's
good job at the show, by the way.
ugh, they're so fucking great, man. Slayer's so fucking good. All right, let's just wrap it up. Anything else to say about any of the five songs, or anything you wanted to get in that you didn't?
Um, I would just say that I do have there's some footage of them in Paris in 1970 playing a lot of these songs, and I have the videotape, like the VHS videotape of this.
Nice.
But it's available digitally all over
I'll
the
put a
place.
link to the YouTube clip below.
And you can just see how authentic it all is. This is true grit. This is the sound of emotion, the sound of their own personal, this is the resolution sound of their own personal conflict and their rough upbringing and their bleak outlook of living in Birmingham and not having options. And they've got it. There's a desperation in how they're they're coming to the stage and
And a
how they're
brotherhood.
presenting,
And a
and
brotherhood.
a brotherhood in that desperation. They're in
Yeah.
the foxhole together,
Yeah.
and they
100%.
are
You could hear
fighting
it.
their way out. They don't know what's going to happen. This is their chance. This is their only hope, and they're just pouring everything they have into it. And man, does it work!
It really does. It really does. So that's it, Dave. That's the great Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath. Super fun conversation. Let's wrap by talking a little bit of Spotify numbers, just because I teased it before and I think it's kind of interesting. And I misspoke before. I said the Wizard had the second most plays on Spotify, and these numbers change all the time based on how many people are coming to the platform and whatever. We talked last time about how Black Sabbath currently has 31 million listeners on monthly listeners on Spotify. That number has noticeably gone up in the wake of Back to the Beginning and Ozzy's death. So that fluctuates even, but I think these numbers can be kind of interesting. So starting with the Wizard, which has 63,973,000 listens or plays, which is a big number, followed very closely by the song Black Sabbath, which has 59,877,000 plays. But
So the
then
Wizards number one.
the Wizard's number one. And
Right.
those two far outrank anything else. And I think this might have something to do with song length,
Yeah.
um,
Oh yeah, for sure.
because song three is Wicked World, kind of surprisingly, which has 17 million listens.
And it's
And then
4 minutes. It's
and it's
4:47.
and it's 4 minutes long. But then you get into the 9 minute 43 second long Wasp Behind the Wall of Sleep, basically NIB, which is 10.5 million, and then Bitterfinger, Sleeping Village, and Warning, which is 14 minutes and 13 seconds long with 5,400,000. So I'm sure song length and whatever, I'm sure there's a version of NIB. I'm not going to look at it now, but I'm sure there's a version of NIB that doesn't have the slashes before it, doesn't have Wasp or Behind the Wall of Sleep, are basically connected to it. And I'm sure that that version from We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll or whatever has a lot more listens. But kind of interesting, I thought.
And I do want to give some special mention to Evil Woman, which was on the
Right.
European release. And
Yes.
that was also a cover by a band called Crow, which I like that a lot. It seems very commercial. It could have easily been the B-side to a single. I don't know if it was or wasn't, but it features some really great Geezer Butler bass fills. But it's a very simple song, and it sounds like it's not their work, but it's them doing it, and
Right.
you can hear their spin on it. I like the song. It's a quick little ditty, and it was on one of these tapes that I got at a gas station that happened to have this other song. I was like, "What is this?" Um, it was a nice surprise, but that's on the European release.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I always forget about that song and I never think about it in relation to the album. But it was, you're right, it was
Yeah.
in fact on European versions of the original release. Um, okay, Dave, we did it. We one down and 8 to go, I guess, as we are going to talk about complete Black Sabbath albums as we get to the end of chronicling each year that those records came out. So that means next week we are putting a cap on top of a cap for 1970 when we will talk about Sabbath LP2, that being Paranoid, which insanely enough also came out in the year of 1970. So that'll be next week.
Cannot wait.
That'll be a good time, man. That was fun. And I will see you next week kicking off with War Pigs. That'll be great.
Oh
Thanks, Dave.
boy. See you then. Okay. Thank you. Bye. I forgot.
Stay heavy. Bye.